So we will be starting our next session. So after an interesting session from Gurugram chapter, we have a session from Bengaluru chapter. The session is about disciplined agile through case study lens. The speaker is Nagaraj Gundappa. This session is facilitated by Kedar Shelawat. Before starting the session, let me thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots. Innovation Roots is a leading consulting and training service provider helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneer of niche publishing services and well known for content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. For more details about Innovation Roots, request you to log into www.innovationroots.com. So, do's and don'ts. Join 5 minutes before the start time. Use high quality speakers and headphones for better sound quality. Please keep your microphones muted and video disabled as they may cause disturbance and bandwidth issue. Questions will be taken via chat box. Please enter your questions in the chat box. At the end of the session, the facilitator or moderator will help and read out the questions to the speaker as per the time available. Please fill the feedback form after the event to help us understand more about the event management. We appreciate your cooperation. So with this, I would like to welcome Kedar. Over to you, Kedar.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's me, Kedar here. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Nagaraj. So, Nagaraj is an expert professional, I would say, project management consultant and trainer with more than 3 decades of experience. Uh, Mr. Nagaraj had actually started his career as a research assistant with LCA, and then gradually moved on into the booming IT sector. And he has held senior management positions in companies like Wipro, to name a few. And he's also delivered offshore delivery and the global delivery for the large, complex, and the global programs for customers such as General Motors, Dun and Bradstreet, Deloitte and Touche, uh, including managing a team of various team members. Uh, Once again, thank you for your help. Over to you, Mr. Nagaraj.
Thank you so much, Kedar. Folks, good evening and once again, and welcome to this presentation. Uh, Thanks, Kedar, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about a fairly new agile methodology by name Disciplined Agile, which is championed by PMI. So the way I would like to present this is through a case study driven approach. I would like to take a case study of a project failure from one of the international airlines, an ERP system for them, and illustrate how usage of disciplined agile could have prevented this project failure. And then I will cover the overview of disciplined agile, covering its principles, people related aspects, the workflow, and the practices. And I will consolidate that through another case study. This time taking over a new existing and taking over an existing agile project into the disciplined agile fold. And I will compare disciplined agile with other methods, and I will also illustrate how disciplined agile scales beyond the project level, and because of this scalability, how disciplined agile provides career at project level and at the organization level beyond project management as well. So that's the agenda. So without much ado, let's get on with the case study. This case study is about airlines ERP system. I hope you will know that just to give you a background, in the airlines, there is a concept of what is called as a central reservation system, which is called Galileo and Amadeus. There are two different central reservation systems. All airlines across the globe and all travel applications such as makemytrip.com, etc., they connect and sync with these central reservation systems. So this is how the same seat of a given flight can be booked by multiple sites, and once it is booked, then it is marked as booked and it shows as booked in every single application. Okay, so this is just a domain background which is needed to appreciate this case study. Now, in this major international airline, they were working with a legacy ERP system, and they wanted to go for re-engineer that to a web-based ERP system and awarded that project to a external vendor, an IT company. This IT company uh, followed Scrum, and they kept delivering sprint on sprint, and completed the project almost on time without much problem. And every time they kept delivering a potentially shippable product increment, uh, you know the end users and the stakeholders, they kept inspecting the features, and they felt that yeah, it matches with their requirements, and they kept accepting them. But it was only towards the end of the project, when all the requirements were delivered and the IT team said, look, we have delivered everything, the stakeholders and the end users realized that the new ERP application doesn't have an interface with the central reservation system. So they have to, what happened is, the IT team looked at all the UIs of the old legacy ERP, replicated all the screens. So in the old ERP, the end users, that is the back office people, used to enter the reservation system, and they say, when they say save, it used to connect to the central reservation system, Galileo or Amadeus, and then it would save the information there. But these people, the new IT team, they replicated these screens in the web-based ERP, but then saved that information in a local database and not into the central reservation system. So these people had to do that manually. So one manual step got introduced, and so what these people had to do, that is the back office people, they had to look at the database, the entry about passenger details, about passenger reservation in the database, and copy paste that into the native UI interfaces of these Galileo and Amadeus. These were very user unfriendly. The workflow was very user unfriendly, and the end users, that is the back office people, finally could not overcome the learning curve, needed to make the transition, and because of that, this new web-based ERP was scrapped. So a clear project failure, right? So now my question is, what went wrong? How could this failure have been averted? Can you please respond in the chat box? We have some, I have allocated some time for the interaction, so so that requirement gathering missed, yes, correct. So what could have been done to guide the team so that this requirement could not have been missed? User journey gap. Okay, Prashant, yes, that is correct. Prashant, is that user journey gap or user journey map? Karthik says customer journey mapping could be one solution. Communication gap, yeah. Now, so yeah, so several of your implicit, absolutely. So that's a very good point. I don't get your name. You are logged in as user 11113588. So yes, implicit requirement missed, and there is a asking end user and legacy ERP applications team ineffective integration assessment. Okay, But that Senthil, the integration assessment, integration requirement itself has been missed. So when the integration has been, I mean, there is no question of testing the integration, but then because the integration requirement itself has been missed. All right. So now the point is, there is a very good point raised by, I mean, if I can get the name of user 1113588, it'll be fantastic. So in what has happened in this scenario is people have followed, the Scrum methodology, and then they've got the user stories and they've met the users, and the users have told them what they do on a day-to-day basis. They've got it, and in this sense, they have got all the explicit requirements. What do we mean by explicit requirements? Those requirements that the stakeholders or the end users make it a point to tell you. So that those have been captured and they have implemented them. But what about the implicit requirements, which the end users may not realize that those requirements exist in the system? How to capture them? So that was missed. Now my question is, yeah, Kaushik, thank you. Yeah, it was you who pointed out the implicit requirements. How to capture the implicit requirements? That's question number one. But another angle to the question, is there something that we can do to the process or the methodology so that such implicit requirements aren't missed? Again, I have earmarked a bit of time for this interaction, so we'll still finish on time, so you don't have to worry. So yes, we know what the problem is, but can we have done something to the process or methodology so that this implicit requirement would not have been missed? Prototype, that's a good one. I mean, when we say prototype, it has to be a proof of concept. What happens is when you just develop a prototype, yes, you may replicate the user interfaces of the old ERP system in a new web-based ERP system. And with the screen flow, you can show that things are working. But if it's an end-to-end proof of concept, then it shows the technology connectivity also. But then for that, you have to understand, you have to detect that there is that technology connectivity, there is an interface. Systems thinking, Anchor, yes. MVP, approved POC, yeah, POC, exactly. So these are some of the things that could have prevented the problem. But my question is a little bit more tricky. Now, see, we are, when we say agile, we are all used to Scrum, and we take Scrum as our map and a guideline, and we start following it. So for example, for getting the requirements, we follow a free format conversation with the users, get the requirements. Can we, I mean, is there a way that we can make a modification to the methodology or the process so that such things don't occur? And the answer to that question would be the disciplined agile methodology. So how could we have prevented that scenario in a disciplined agile methodology? Let me introduce one aspect of disciplined agile methodology called choosing your way of working. If I were to use a disciplined agile methodology, in the beginning of the project, I would set out to gather requirements. Now, and if I were using disciplined agile, I would look at, hey, what is the process goal that corresponds to requirements gathering? There is a process goal called explore scope. What is a process goal? What is this diagram all about? I will come to it shortly. But let me explain from a case study perspective what I'm going to do. And I will look at this explore scope, and then I will see, hey, while exploring the scope, what are all the different things that I have to take care of? So I have to explore the purpose, explore usage, explore the domain, the process, user interface needs, general requirements, quality requirements, and so on. And let's look at usage. So if I look at the usage, so these are all called, from a disciplined agile terminology perspective, what you see here, this explore scope is called a process goal. And these rectangles here, they're all called decision points. And the ones which you see as free text without any, associated box, so these are all called the options. So I will, for example, see, hey, what is the, how do I explore usage? So I mean, there are multiple techniques: user persona, UML use case diagrams, usage scenario, use case, user story, and user story map. Let's assume that I choose usage scenario and persona. Then what I would do is I will first draw out the people who make the bookings, the booking agents, as I will model them as a persona. And I will go through the I will go through the booking reservation end to end. And in this, I'm this structure or format forces me to list down a concept of what is called as actors that was widely prevalent during the use case and scenario era. So then in this concept, not only the human users are identified as actors, other applications that are interacting with the application that we are developing are also considered as actors. So when we ask this question as to what are the other applications interacting with this application, then we get the answer that there are central reservation systems. Then we know that, okay, when you make this, explore this usage scenario that is end to end, okay, the ultimately the end point is the persistence of data in the central reservation system. So once we discover that interface requirement, then we can build that into the proof of concept, and then we can build that into our integration assessment at the end, etc., so that this requirement would not have been missed. So the even though we kept delivering sprint on sprint the potentially shippable product increments, every time whatever we delivered were acceptable, but nobody had the complete picture and could identify the missing requirements. And only when the end users got to into a real use, then these missing requirements were discovered. Okay, so now this, what you see on the slide, is called a process goal diagram. There are many such process goal diagrams in disciplined agile. And what you do is you will have to visualize what are all the different things that you have to do in your project and what option you will choose. So for example, if I choose usage scenario and let's say persona, then there is a guidebook which explains in very simple terms. So what is persona? There is just one paragraph explanation. What is usage scenario? There is one simple explanation. That's all. So you can go through this and decide for yourself what is it that you have to do in the project. So now, where does that process goal come from? Why is that there? It's because the context counts. There are what are called principles in disciplined agile, like how there are agile principles and agile manifesto. There are agile principles here, which says context counts. Context of every project can be different, and you cannot have a one size fits all solution. So there are other principles called be pragmatic, which means don't be dogmatic and don't try to be a purist. See what works for the project and do it. Okay, so there are other 6 other principles. If it will take a lot of time if I spend time in each of these principles, so I will just point that disciplined agile is described in terms of 4 views, and one of them is principles, which is delight customers; be awesome, which focuses on continuous improvements; context counts, that means your practice should change to and suit to every context of the project; be pragmatic, choice is good; optimize flow, work around organize around products and services; and enterprise awareness. And this is part of what is called as the 4 views of disciplined agile. Disciplined agile is described as to be consisting of 4 elements, and one of them is the mindset, which is described by these principles. And the other ones are people, like how Scrum has 3 roles, that is the Scrum team, the Scrum product owner, and the Scrum master. There are some roles and responsibilities and the team structures defined in disciplined agile, that is the people angle. And then there is a life cycle, that is the workflow. How does the work flow? Like how there are some 5 ceremonies in a sprint, I mean in Scrum. So there are some life cycle models in disciplined agile. And then there are practices. So the practices is what we illustrated in the form of a process goal diagram. So explore scope was one of the multiple process goal diagrams. So let me quickly explore the overview of disciplined agile teams. So in terms of team, the Scrum Master is called the team lead, and team lead carries out certain project management responsibilities as well, apart from the Scrum Master's responsibilities. And then there is a product owner, there is a team member, which is similar to a Scrum team, and then there is an architecture owner. And then there is a stakeholder, and these are the primary roles. And then there are some supporting roles, such as specialist, independent tester, domain expert, technical expert, integrator, and so on. So essentially that described the people angle, right? So there are 2 more views. Flow, how do we ensure workflow, and what are the practices? Now let's look at the flow. In Scrum, there is one model of the flow. In Kanban, there is one model of the flow. But in Disciplined Agile, there are 6 models of flow, which you can also call life cycle models. There is Agile model and continuous delivery Agile. There is lean, which is Kanban, and then continuous delivery lean. There is a program which caters to multiple projects. So it's a program delivery life cycle. And then exploratory. So when we are handling the upstream, upstream level, when the project is still in a very initial mode, we can follow another model called the exploratory model. Now let's look at just one of these models, which is called the Agile model. How is it different from other Agile models? It augments the existing Agile models. For example, this lifecycle model, which is called the Agile lifecycle model, Disciplined Agile lifecycle model. So there are 3 phases: inception, construction, and transition. And each phase has a goal. Now, if you take a Scrum or a Kanban, if you have to use it for a new application development, then the sprints or the pull starts after some time. If the project kicks off today, it's not that today itself you will start the sprints, right? You have to populate the product backlog. Or in a Kanban, you have to populate the work request. Compare. Amar, I will, and there is a slide, for how DAD safe and less compare. I will come to that in the end. So thanks for posing that question. I will answer that in the end, because we have got some slides on scalability of disciplined agile. So so basically, whatever be the agile model that you choose, there is some initial phase. Depending on the size of the project, it could last from anywhere between 3 weeks to 6 weeks, where you will focus on requirements elicitation and prepare your product backlog. You will take some architectural decisions. You will create maybe some high level data model, etc. And that phase is unorganized in other agile models. But disciplined agile tries to put some clarity into that phase, and it calls it inception phase. And it has some process goal diagrams to guide how work should be done in that phase and what is the end result of that phase. So there is a milestone called stakeholder vision, and there is another milestone called proven architecture. So by the time you begin the sprints, these two should be ready: stakeholder vision and proven architecture. And then there are some process guidelines. And then when you keep delivering the potentially shippable product increments, so when the construction begins, that is the sprints begin. And this is very much similar to Scrum, okay, the 5 ceremonies and so on. And on the other hand, when your MEP, the minimum viable product, is ready, so in Scrum also, it is not that the potentially shippable product increment that you deliver at the end of each sprint, you don't put it on to production. So when you have the MEP, you can deploy it on production, and that's called a transition phase. So you will have to take care of some additional work before you put it on, deploy it onto production. And there are some process goal diagrams that guide you how to do it, and that's called a transition phase. You can have multiple transition phases in a single project. So this is the agile lifecycle model. So like that, there are totally 6 lifecycle models in disciplined agile. And then there are some guidelines. So for example, there is a decision tree which helps you to decide which lifecycle model is best for your project. Now, disciplined agile is so flexible that you can start with, for example, the continuous delivery, the agile model. Maybe after 6 months, once you have attained a certain level of maturity in terms of stability of the product backlog and your test scripts, automated testing, and maybe if you have done some automation of deployment also, and if you have matured in your DevOps practice, you can then switch over to continuous delivery agile or continuous delivery lean. So it's not that you have to choose one cycle, a life cycle model, and be stuck with it for the entire project, life of the project. No, that's not the case. So context counts. That is the principle. So if the project context has changed, then you change the life cycle model in between a project also. So that's about the we have seen the mindset through the principles, the people in terms of roles and responsibilities, and the flow in terms of the life cycle models. And what is left is the practices, which is determined through what are called as the process goal diagrams, right? So what we saw earlier through the Airlines project, explore scope was just one process goal diagram. Now behold, because you will see a deluge of process goals, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow all of that. So it's like a menu card, okay, but you will choose only a few items that you can consume. Okay, so the menu card is big, but the items that you will consume can still be manageable. So this diagram lists about 21 process goals which are applicable through the inception, construction, and transition phase, and some of them are applicable throughout the project, which they're all ongoing. So for example, farm team, align with enterprise direction, explore scope. So these are all the process goals typically you have to decide in the initial part of the project. Some could be relevant, and some need not be relevant. If we skip any of the processes, will it affect the project? Not at all, Kaushik. It doesn't affect the project. You will, I mean, the process goal diagrams provide you the options. So it is the project team which chooses what is relevant for them, and they will follow only that. So maybe you will follow 5 to 10% of the process options given to you. Okay, so so for example, there are some ongoing process goals: grow team members, evolve way of working, coordinate activities, address risk, govern delivery team, etc. So there are some construction related process goals: address changing stakeholder needs. So this is what takes care of evolving requirements and changes to the requirements. refining the requirements, etc., produce a potentially consumable solution, and so on. And then there are some transition goals, etc. So now this explore scope we have already seen, and similarly there are other similar process goals. Plan the release. What are the options for us to plan the release? So we have all these options. Estimation, choose schedule cadences, okay, level of detail of the plan, scheduling strategy, and so on and so forth. So there are 21 such process goal diagrams which will provide us guidance. Okay, so that is we choose the practices that we want for the project. So this is the overview of disciplined agile. Now let's see that in action once again through another case study. Now this case study is from an automotive industry. It's a multinational automotive company, and they were having an engineering application managed by a Scrum team who followed a 3-week sprint. There were complaints about their productivity of the team and quality of their output. Now, I mean, as a coach, I had the opportunity to attend their retrospectives. In the retrospective, Scrum retrospectives, sprint retrospectives, they had no clue about what to do about quality or the productivity. They said, that's how it is. I mean, we can't do anything more. And their retrospectives largely focused on some small things. So for example, hey, this file naming convention, should it be like that? It is confusing, we'll rename it something else. Or this should be the common directory structure where we should put all the items. Okay. Or things like our communication, the last time this was communicated verbally, and but it should be done in writing. You should send an email. Okay, so these were the nature, it was these mundane issues that were being discussed in the sprint retrospectives. So they were not discussing, they were not trying to go to the bottom of the problem, and the customer complaint remained. So what we did when I had to do some consulting for this team is we did a root cause analysis using a 5 why method. So there are it coincidentally, for both the problems, that is quality and productivity, the root cause was the same. So so let's look at it. Productivity was a concern. Why there is a productivity is in question? Because the testing and fixing was taking more time, more time than development. And why is that happening? So let's come to this. Bugs used to escape the first round of testing. I mean, if the testing is done properly, when you do one round of testing and fix all the bugs discovered in the first cycle, in the second cycle of testing, only a subset of bugs that were detected in the first round should get caught. And then you fix them also. Maybe in 3 rounds or 4 rounds of testing, you should be through with the testing. But that's not how it was happening here. In the second round of testing, they were discussing, they were discovering new bugs which were not there, which were not discovered during the first round. So why was that happening? We found that test case coverage was not adequate, which means when they choose some product backlog items, which could be some bugs or some new enhancements, they would write formal test cases to some extent, and to cover the remaining test scenario, they will do it simply undocumented testing, so intuitive testing. So when you do intuitive testing, whatever occurs to your mind as a test scenario, you will test it then. So they would do new types of testing in every cycle. They would come out with new types of bugs and then fix them. And testing is never inadequate. It is taking more time because you are doing in this fashion, and still some bugs would escape, and resulting in both productivity issue as well as quality issue. And why was that happening? Because the test cases were written for bug and not for the corresponding requirement. And why that happened? Because requirement traceability matrix did not exist. If requirement traceability matrix existed, what would have happened is when you receive a bug or a enhancement feature enhancement, then you see what is the requirement that it corresponds to, and then you will see through the requirement traceability matrix what are the test cases that are mapped to this requirement. And then on one hand you will fix the bug or implement the enhancement feature, and on the other hand you will enhance the test cases to cover the bug or the changes which is done as part of the enhancement. And then the new set of test cases, that is the enhanced test case set, that would be adequate. So you run through the whole test cases, and then in 2-3 rounds you would finish the testing. That was not happening. That was resulting in both productivity as well as a quality issue. So basically, now if we adopt disciplined agile, for this scrum team, what would they do? Now in their sprint retrospectives, they will choose, hey, this is the customer complaint, which process goal addresses this customer complaint. So for example, there is a process goal called accelerate value delivery. Okay, so this is the process goal. Hey, is there some practice that we are missing here, and because of that we have these issues? We can go through the details. Now for example, here there is maintain traceability, and then for that there are some options. So through this we can make out that, look, these are the practices that we are missing, and hence let's start implementing those practices. So so basically, to understand what these practices are, we can go through these very small and crisp explanations. So basically, if you apply or if you adopt disciplined agile, or if you implement disciplined agile in an existing project that is applying either that is using either Scrum or Kanban, what you will do: train people on disciplined agile, and then in the sprint retrospectives start referring to the choose your way of working, that is these process goal diagrams and explanations, etc. So uh, refer to customer complaints and map them to corresponding goal diagrams, and choose the best options to improve, and continue the guided continuous improvement journey, retrospective after retrospective. Which means, instead of talking about whether what spelling rule did you use, which directory structure you should follow, how some communication was missed, etc., instead of just focusing on the day-to-day transactional issues, you can do some fundamental rethinking on some of your practices and bring in substantive improvement into the project. So this is how you would do a retrospective if you were to use disciplined agile. Now, let me quickly compare disciplined agile with other methods. Uh, what has happened so far? I mean, if we look at the long journey of the software industry over the last 30 years, so there was chaotic. Maybe in the late 80s and in the very early 90s, we used to be chaotic. And then there came the process intensive heavy methods, which is ISO and CMMI based, and they started becoming like little agile with the incremental and iterative model. And then we have Scrum, Kanban, Safe, and all the evolution of the agile methodologies in practice. Now, sorry about this, my mouse is a little sensitive. So what has happened along with this evolution is that the software engineering methodologies, that is the way we develop software, the engineering practices, they have also evolved. We were using no method earlier, and then structured systems analysis and design techniques, and then we started using object oriented software engineering, design patterns, requirements engineering, architectural practices. There are so many engineering practices have evolved, they have nothing to do with either whether you are following a waterfall or a traditional methodology or an agile methodology. These things are required to develop quality solution, quality application. Now, what has happened in many Scrum teams, even though Scrum doesn't say so, Kanban doesn't say so, many of them, they have discarded, apart from discarding the traditional methodologies, they have discarded the engineering practices also. For example, in this specific organization, before they adopted Scrum, or when they adopted Scrum, they were all going through trainings in requirements engineering also. So they were all trained professional business analysts. And when they started following Scrum, they carried forward their traditional, I mean, not traditional, their engineering practices also. For example, if they have to elicit requirements, they know what techniques they have to use, and then to ensure clarity and completeness of requirements, etc., they would do and ensure project success. But over a period of time, when everybody went Scrum, they stopped training their professionals in requirements engineering. So the new people who started coming, they were not trained in any software engineering practices, and they started becoming ad hoc. So they would understand anything about software development. What they understand only what is said in the Scrum guide, which is about 13 pages long. They don't know anything about anything else. So that's what has led to failure of many projects. Now, what disciplined agile does is it takes advantages of these lean and slim methodologies, agile method and flexible agile methodologies, but it retains the advantages of these evolved engineering practices. So that's how disciplined agile eliminates one syndrome. What is that syndrome? Out of sight is out of mind. So if a team is told to do n number of things, then they will do all the n number of things. If you tell them that, look, you do n divided by 2 things, or half of n things, and the remaining, it's up to you, you don't talk about it. So in the initial part, the second half, that is the n by 2 other half, which is left to the discretion of the team, the people excuse me, start doing it based on their discretion, but on an ongoing basis, because it is out of sight, it gets dropped out from the mind also. And to illustrate that phenomena, we can make use of this shu hari, which is a Japanese martial arts concept, which is used as a metaphor to explain agile methodologies by many agile thought leaders. What they say is, uh, in traditional Japanese martial arts, when a disciple starts learning martial arts, he has to be a stickler to the methods, rules. If they say this is how you have to take your breath in, and this is how you have to move your limb, and only then you have to lift your leg, etc., that's exactly how he has to do. He cannot do his own invention. But once that person masters all the rules, then in the half phase, that person detaches from the rules and breaks the limits and starts evolving his own ways. And once he perfects his own ways, that is when that person is in the re phase. So whatever that expert does, that becomes a new rule. But for you to be in the ha and then the re phase, you have to have gone through the shu phase. That is, you should understand the basic discipline and basic methods and the consequences of omitting them. Now, when the industry started following Scrum, most people were trained in many engineering, in software engineering aspects. So they had gone through the shu phase, and they were all in the ha or the re phase. So when they started following the Scrum or even Kanban, then the shu phase was already there. It was inbuilt in them, so they would do it without being told. But then over a period of time, in when those people graduated to program management and business management, and when the new flock came in, they did not go through this shoe phase. So they are now directly in the ha and the re phase, and now as a result they are in chaos, at least in the context of the case study that I have explained. So given that, uh, uh, basically, if we can compare traditional methods, Scrum and Kanban, and Disciplined Agile, traditional uh, traditional processes pegs the practitioners counterproductively to shoe phase. So that means how much ever you understand, you keep following the same principles, you have to get the signature of the auditor, get auditor, and etc. So it is counterproductive. In Scrum and Kanban, that doesn't address the shoe phase. So Disciplined Agile provides the guidelines needed for the shoe phase and also the flexibility needed for the ha and re phase. So if you have gone through the shoe phase, you have the flexibility for the ha and re phase. So if I can simply explain that, through the uh, DA metaphor with some executive lunch, let's say processes are there to deliver end results. Let's compare that processes through food. The old traditional methods loaded people with the practices, so they became process heavy, and they forgot how to work. Okay, but what Scrum and Kanban did is they provided executive lunch, and so that the people focus on work, but they also deprived and starved people of some nutritious content of the meal, which are the engineering practices. Now the Disciplined Agile combines both. It gives you a large menu, but and so that it gives you the flexibility, and it eliminates the out of sight is out of mind syndrome, but it lets you prepare your own executive lunch, so that you don't forget the work and get lost in the meal. So you don't get lost in the processes, but you ensure delivery result. So this is how I would say the this is how I would say Disciplined Agile, maps to, compares to other traditional and agile methods. So with that, Disciplined Agile scales beyond project delivery. It has Disciplined Agile delivery, disciplined DevOps layer, then the value stream layer, and the enterprise layer, and it has got those process goal diagrams at all these levels. And then it has a program lifecycle, which combines multiple lifecycle models. And then the career journey starts with a DASM. For a person who's new to agile methodology, he can go through this DASM, Disciplined Agile Scrum Master certification. And then once he gains experience, you go through the DASSM, Disciplined Agile Senior Scrum Master. But for those who are already experienced in agile, so this will be the entry point for them. And then you become a Disciplined Agile value stream consultant, where you can add value at program and portfolio levels. And there is an independent track also called the Disciplined Agile Coach. Okay, so that's about that's about the Disciplined Agile. Yeah, Prashant, this is Prashant, MJ. So can I answer that one question? Do we have time before I hand over the session to the moderator? So there is one question on
Yes.
how does DAD save less compare?
Yes.
Yeah,
So we
please.
have about a couple of minutes left, so we should be good ahead.
Yeah,
So
you can have.
Okay, sure. So essentially, Disciplined Agile has some enterprise flow, which is there in SAFe also. So it has, as I illustrated, so these are the process blades which addresses the know-how which is there in SAFe. But one difference is that SAFe says that for you to, you should have 50 to 125 people for you to launch an agile release train. If you have, let's say, a program for about 25 people, then the SAFe methods may become a little overhead. That limitation is not there in Disciplined Agile. Even if you have a small program, you can still use a thin or a lean disciplined agile program management. So that's the difference. Less is for large scale Scrum. So it doesn't provide you the flow from portfolio to program to project. It just integrates multiple projects. That's all. So with that, let me conclude. I'm almost run out of time and hand over to Prashant. Thank you.
Yep, I think before we finish the session, we have a question from one of the participants, and that question is probably Agile Manifesto expect a team to be expert software engineers?
Now, that's a good question. Agile Manifesto is silent about it. However, some Agile thought leaders are saying so outside the scope of Agile Manifesto. So that's why it is those thought leaders who are coming out with this shu ha ri concept. So they expect them to have some level of maturity in software engineering. That's correct.
Uh, can
Thank
I
you once
come,
again.
please?
Sure.
My
Sure.
question was related, before Agile, people started learning or using Agile, even in olden time, so-called waterfall method was very strong about software engineering. So
Correct.
when you adopt the new methodology of working, does not mean that you forget the basic expectation from you. That's why I mentioned that. Thank you.
Correct. Sure, you are absolutely right, Mr. Goyal. So, and I agree with you. Don't throw the baby along with bathwater. That sometimes is forgotten. And just one small addition about Agile Manifesto. Agile Manifesto lists 4 things on the left side and 4 things on the right side, and says, in the end, while we value items on the right, we value the items on the left more. Which means they don't say that, hey, the items on the right are useless. For example, documentation, contracts, processes, they don't say that it is useless. It is useful. However, it should be subservient to the end results that we need to deliver. That's all Agile Manifesto says. But that is forgotten by some organizations who ignore the processes. They throw the baby along with the bathwater.
Thank you once again, Nagaraj, for the explanation.
You're welcome.
This was really an interesting session, especially for someone like me who's actually getting used to Agile in the real world of project management. So thank you once again for the great insights and a great session, Nagaraj.
Sir, hi, this is Ankur.
Hi, Ankur.
Sir, I have a one question. Usually, what happen in the project management? Sometimes we feel that we need have a strict timeline that in that particular milestone that we need to achieve some application development and we need to deliver these things. And but if we are following for the agile process, there is no set of milestone. We are taking some product backlog, getting increment, and we are delivering as per the agile process. So how it can be reach as a project management standpoint that agile can be fruitful for these milestones determination point.
Uh, but the question did not. I mean, Kedar, did you understand the question? Uh, can you rephrase the question a
Yes,
bit?
yeah, I can rephrase. I can rephrase simply. Like sometimes, customer asks that what is the milestone to deliver these set of requirements. So we have a
Okay.
strict timeline or maybe some strict dates that these are the particular dates we need to deliver these set of requirements. But if we are, following for the agile process, there is no, simply way of milestones because whatever in our product backlog we are delivering these things.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
so that
So
is
got the
why in
question.
the, yeah, waterfall
So got the,
process, and then this way, yeah.
yeah, got the question, Ankur. Thank you. So the answer would be same whether we follow Scrum or Disciplined Agile. So those milestones are in the form of MVPs, minimum viable products. So when you keep delivering features after features, some set of features put together would constitute a theme which makes sense from an end consumer's perspective. So when you release all the features related to this minimum viable set, then your client can put it on productions so that the end consumers can start using it. So while you continue to develop application, some of the features which you have already delivered can be consumed by the end consumers. So those MEPs, maybe 2, 3, 4, whatever, depending on the size of the project, will be the milestones for your agile project.
Okay, got your point. Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nagaraj. Nagaraj, I have one final question. I know we are running out of time. How useful will this discipline agile be if we try to apply it on the IT infrastructure industry within the IT domain? Now, I understand that discipline agile is primarily for the software programming and primarily the software lifecycle. But how is there a way where we can apply it from an IT infrastructure standpoint or IT infrastructure projects and programs to be specific?
Sure. Kedar, what I illustrated is from a software development perspective. However, if you looked at the big picture, it has what is called as the process goal diagrams for the IT, the security, data management, operations, etc. So it's as much applicable to the operations as much as it is for the application development. And both put together is called the disciplined agile DevOps layer. And over and above that, you have an IT layer, a value stream layer, and an enterprise layer. So it's a complete set of solutions for an enterprise to achieve what is called as the enterprise agility.
Thank you, Nagaraj.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kedar. It was a great session, Nagraj. Thank you very much.